Greetings, friends. Today, I have a surprise for you. This surprise might not seem like a fun surprise at first, but I think once you get into pre-calculus and higher level math classes, you'll understand why it is so very important. I need you to understand, this is something that if we were in class, we would take quizzes on this every single day to make sure that you would commit this to memory. So I really want you to take the time to understand and memorize what we're about to learn. Now, in order to make that a little easier for you, we are going to take it one step at a time. What am I talking about, friends? I'm talking about the unit circle. Yes, the long-awaited unit circle. It looks very complex, it looks very difficult, but I'm telling you, friends, it's not. There are three pieces of information on a unit circle. There are degrees, radians, and coordinates. We're going to learn about each one of these pieces individually before we put all of them together. So today, we are going to focus on degrees and radians. Now, if you did not see the previous video or do not have an understanding of how to convert between degrees and radians, you need to stop what you're doing now, go back to the video made yesterday on degrees and radians, watch that, and learn how to convert. Because if you do not, you are going to be lost today. We are going to start with degrees. So, what makes the unit circle a unit circle? The unit circle has a radius of 1 unit. It is 1 unit wide. It is also centered at the origin 0, 0. So this point right here at the center, if I were to think of this as being placed on a coordinate grid, this dot in the center is the origin. This is like the x-axis. And this is like the y-axis. And what I can do is I can rotate and make angles of various degrees and radians. A unit circle is made up of special segments. So first we're going to start with degrees. I mentioned this line here is as if we are starting from the x-axis. This is the positive x-axis. That is going to be our initial side. And then the rest of these lines that you see represent our terminal side. So the first one, and probably easiest to identify, is the one that goes straight up and down. If I were to start from the initial side on the x-axis and go all the way, I have now created a 90-degree angle. So straight up at the top, if I look due north, that represents 90 degrees. All of these degree measures are as if we are going from this initial side. My initial side is never going to change. So if I were to keep going, this would represent a 180-degree angle. If I were to keep going and stop at the negative y-axis, I'm still going all the way around. This is like a continuous angle. This would be 270 degrees. And last but not least, if I wanted to, I could go all the way around and be right back where I started. Of course, going all the way around is 360 degrees. Now, if I didn't move at all, if I started at the positive x-axis and ended at the positive x-axis and did not go around at all, how many degrees did I move? 0. That's right. So 130 degrees has a coterminal angle that we talked about yesterday. We talked about coterminal angles. Coterminal angles can be found by adding or subtracting 360 degrees. So of course, if I go all the way around, that's 360 degrees. But if I don't go around at all, that's 0 degrees. So on the unit circle at this position here, with our positive x-axis, there are 2 degree measures listed, because it could be 0 degrees or it could be 360 degrees. Now let's take a look at this first quadrant. Quadrant 1 is cut by 3 lines. But I would like for you to notice that these 3 lines are not evenly spaced. We have a line here, a line here, and a line here. So an orange, a yellow, and a green. Notice that the yellow line appears to be halfway between 0 and 90 degrees. That is not an accident. That is intentional. That yellow line measures halfway between 0 and 90 degrees. So halfway between 0 and 90 degrees would be 45 degrees. I'm going to use a darker yellow here. Now, if I were to continue, there's a middle line in every single quadrant. All of those yellow lines are in fact halfway between their axes. So the yellow line in the second quadrant would be an angle made halfway between 90 and 180 degrees. Well, the angle halfway between 90 and 180 is 135 degrees. I would like to point out that all of these angles are created as if we were drawing an angle with its initial side on the positive x-axis going up to that line. So I'm talking about this angle here. This big angle is 135 degrees. All of these angles are coming from an initial side being on the positive x-axis. The next angle we're going to look at is in the middle of the third quadrant. If I was continuing around, the middle of the third quadrant is going to be halfway between 180 and 270 degrees. Well, halfway between 180 and 270 is 225. 225 degrees. In the fourth quadrant, the yellow line is halfway between 270 and 360. Halfway between 270 degrees and 360 degrees is 315 degrees. Here is the first portion of the completed unit circle. These are all of the halfway angles or the 45s. Starting from the initial side, 45 degrees, 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 45 degrees. Now let's move on to the next. Here you have a unit circle where I have omitted the halfway markers. So all of the 45 degrees have been removed from this picture for the time being. I'm hopeful that by doing this, it's a little easier to see the connection between the other two sections. So here I'm going to draw an initial side of my angle at the positive x-axis and a terminal side at the 90-degree angle because I just want us to focus on the first quadrant. Hopefully, it is apparent that these angles, these lines, almost appear to be cutting that quadrant into 3 equal pieces. Which means each of these angles are going to be cut into 3 equal pieces. So if I were to cut them into 3 equal pieces going between 0 and 90 degrees, each angle would need to be 30 degrees. So this first angle would be a 30-degree angle. If I were to continue from the initial side to the second to include both slices of cake or pizza, then that would be 30 plus 30 more, which would be 60 degrees. And if you go around, each line continues in that pattern, slicing each quadrant into 3 equal pieces. So if I were to continue to go around, from 60 to 90 degrees is another 30 degrees. If I were to continue, I would need to add another 30 degrees to 90, making that 120. If I keep going, I'm going to add another 30 degrees to be 150. If I add another 30 degrees, that would be 180. Add another 30 degrees, it's 210. Skip over that middle line, add another 30 to get to 240 degrees. Add another 30, 270. Add another 30, 300. Add another 30, 330. Add another 30. There's our 360. All the way around. So the lines that are closest to the quadrants, the positive x and positive y, or negative x or negative y axes, those are going to be your what we call 30-60 lines. Going back to the initial picture you saw of the completed unit circle, this is a picture that is going to go in your notebook or on some piece of paper that needs to be readily available and referred back to often to ensure that you understand and memorize this information. Today, to summarize, we're going to fill in the degree portion of this circle. The degree portion of this particular circle is indicated by the small circle there, it does give you the degree symbol. Please make sure that you include the degree symbol. On the x-axis, you see there are 2 lines. That's, of course, to indicate the 0 and 360 degrees that we talked about earlier that happen at this particular place. Within the first quadrant, we started with a 30-degree angle. The middle was my 45. And then the next was my 60-degree angle. I'm at the positive y-axis, which is, of course, 90 degrees. Then I have a 30 that's close to it, so I'm adding 30 degrees to it. There's a halfway point, a halfway angle, which was 135. $150, and then $180. Pause the video and continue filling in the rest of the unit circle with the degrees. As you're filling in the degrees of your unit circle, I would like for you to take a moment and see if you identify any patterns. Anything that might help you quickly fill in this unit circle. Because like I said, if we were in class together, we would be taking daily unit circle quizzes. They would be timed, and we would get faster and faster every day to ensure that you memorize this information. When you get to pre-calculus and further math classes, it will be imperative that this information is readily available to you without even so much as a thought. You know it like you know your name. No pressure, but please commit this to memory. In the next video, we will convert all of these degrees to radians.